to our extensive audience out there and our audience of one Michelle. We are here to talk through the last chat that we had, the interview that we had with Adrian and Deb regarding around the topic of being choked as Christians. And the context to that, again, to remind you, was where we are together trying to solve how it is that we can reignite the Church of Christ. How do we go from what the statistics tell us, that more than 80% of the body of Christ is not active? Okay, so the 2 billion or so Christians out there, of which there could be 1 billion or more Catholics, but together, if we call ourselves Christians, 2 billion of us, it's saying that on average, 80% of us are not very active. So we have faith in word. We obviously have an alignment to the Christian faith, but we're not active. And we're exploring that together with a view that how do we help each other ignite the faith of Christians, one Christian at a time. And so under our 3-circle model, which with the inner circle being the individual, we're going to talk about issues as individuals, and then the next circle being who you fellowship with, who are those in your world that sharpen you, and then the last circle being where in your world do you shine? Do you exist as a Christian? What does that third circle world look like for you? So we're going to tackle those one at a time. And under that first circle, our first topic of discussion that we thought we would interview and begin the discussion between all of us on was on why it is that Christians are choked. And that term choked comes from that passage in Mark 13 about the weeds, and it talks about the different soils, and the third soil being a soil where there are lots of weeds, and it chokes you as a Christian. And that's just a topic that we've been embarking on. We were interviewing and asking questions on. We were asking questions like, why is it that we get choked? Why does that happen to us? What is it about our world and the pace of our lives that result in us kind of losing that fire in our belly? And I would ask anyone listening, and Michelle, Deb, myself, Rowan, all you guys out there who are listening, are you at the moment on fire for Jesus? Are you like at your optimum? Are you just pumped? Are you just absolutely wanting to see the kingdom come, loving Jesus? And that's a question. As I ask myself that, I think, no, I'm not, and I'm on a journey, and we all are, and we never arrive. So, amen. But where am I relative to where I feel God could draw me to? And I do think it's this journey of moving forward. I'm really loving talking with Deb, Adrian, and this crew of people that are around us. How do we sharpen one another? How do we help each other? And one of those issues to me is, what is it that chokes my life? What chokes and robs me of the joy of being Christian, that robs me of my perspectives? And right now for me, it would always center around what are the things that might wake you up at night. And I think I shared that for me, it would be in and around my work, my vocation. Because I work for myself, I've got certain deals, property deals that I'm moving on at the moment. The world of property in Australia, all over the world, inflation, interest rates, everything shifting and changing. The ground upon which we stand, the houses in which we live, are shaking. Cracks are appearing. So the whole thing there of just having to wake up and go, what am I going to do with that property? What am I going to do with that deal? What are we going to do? That's the kind of stuff that I can wake up just worried or anxious or just uncertain, at least. And in that uncertainty and worry, well, my perspective and focus isn't upwards. It isn't into the things of God. It's into, I need to problem solve this. I need to work this stuff out. And that could rob my joy. That could rob my perspective. And you'll see it leaking out in the way I get shorter in my fuse with my family. You'll see it. And that then catapults to guilt into, I feel bad about that. I feel shame, and so all these different things weigh on you. And all this, you're kind of limping along in your faith, You don't feel like reading the Bible, don't feel like really going to church, etc., etc. So, you know what? I want to put it over to you guys, to comment on that. What are the things that rob you and choke you if you've yeah, do you want to start there? Any of you guys want to chime in?
I mean, just with that question of, that whole idea of being choked,
Yeah,
I think we talked a little bit about this before, about just, Adam Grant's word of languishing from
yeah,
2021.
come on, yeah,
And
good
so
word.
I think it's hard to move from languishing to being on fire. Well, for me, I would imagine there'd be a transition, right? Languishing, recovery, rest.
Yeah,
There'd be some sort of journey there, because for me, there's like a chasm. And I don't know, just as you were talking, I was thinking, yeah, definitely work for one is obviously one of the things that probably weighs in. And I came up with 3 Ds actually, just really quickly as you were talking.
go,
One
go.
is like deadlines. So, just, related to work, there's always like obviously stuffing going on in the micro with work, but even in the macro, like for me, currently I'm on a contract and there's just a lot of restructure going on. And yeah, I mean, things, I wouldn't necessarily say I'm anxious or worried, but they are definitely occupying, the back of my head. And so I
Yep,
think,
yep,
deadlines and work definitely is one. The
yep,
second D I would say is distractions.
yep,
So something I've tried just recently, and along this idea of just, living a simpler and slower, more authentic life, is I've just tried to remove myself from just little habits. So, for example, I removed all my news apps from my phone, and I literally just check the news once a day, because it was just, I don't know about you, but particularly over the past 2 years, like it was just getting ridiculous. They call it
yeah.
doom scrolling, but
Well,
you can quickly find yourself going through this
hey,
cycle of just,
dude, that's
and
cool.
it affects, your mental health. And so I think just limiting myself to the news once a day. I've removed, certain platforms, social media platforms, so just trying to create more boundaries, so I'm not always distracted. And then the last D, because I know you want to chime in, is just feeling a little bit disconnected. And I think, again, just, a product of the pandemic. Before the pandemic, I was at work 5 days a week, church on Sundays, and life looks very different to that. And so, yeah, I think those 3 Ds are all contributing to the choking.
Mm. I love it, Mish. How did you come up with that, man? Just in
Just
yeah,
then.
that was a cool little riff. I love that. That is so cool. Yeah, and I loved your points too, Deb. I'm going to give it to you in a second, but Michelle, I love what you said there about being distracted, and that's something that. So I find that it's almost medicating my anxiety, if you know what I mean. Like, so if I'm if I'm too alert and I'm worrying about work, well, getting on the news media feed can occupy this anxious mind. Do you know what I mean? But actually, it causes more anxiety when I think about it too, because as you say, look at all the stuff that comes through, and it absolutely bombs your heart. Some of the devastation, the sadness, you know what I mean. It actually makes it worse. So that's a really good discipline. That's the fourth D you just showed me on the way back out. The discipline to get rid of distractions. Love it.
No, and I really liked, Michelle, when you just raised that thing about the chasm, or there's a step there needs to be some sort of pathway from when you're disconnected and all those D's to being on fire. And I think this has really come home to me this last week when I've had some conversations that I mentioned to you guys before. It's like, this definition of being on fire, maybe not quite the correct way of trying to work out what it is to be like um you know following Jesus in whatever the height or the valley you're in. So the on fire kind of gives this impression that everything's going amazing, we've got all the energy, we've got 100% focus, like, and sharp, but I feel like as well in the valley, or when going through some really difficult stuff, or you're feeling disconnected, but there's something about, like, it's not just trying to get from one side of the chasm to the other, but what if they can re-engage you from your heart and your spirit back to Jesus, and have this, like, I don't know, communion, and this ability to really sort of dig deep.
There's this idea of cares of the world. And then I think I remember reading just a snippet of um, a book summary a while ago where the person said, we are bombarded by thousands of advertising messages a day, right? And so even though you don't necessarily look at it and say like, oh, gee, like what does that mean, right? There are a lot of smart people. I briefly worked at a creative agency, and you know their whole goal, their whole creative energy is to drive like an impulse, right? That where you are is not enough, right? I mean, that's really the core of advertising, right? Whatever you have is not enough, which is why you need to buy our product, right? Which is why you need to do this, right? Which is why you need to purchase our service. It's like, you need to entertain this idea, like, et cetera, right? There's this constant bombardment, and frankly, it's multiplied, right, exponentially since social media became, very much mainstream, right? That between that and like handheld phones, right? I mean, like before you can say like, well, if I stopped watching TV, um, I can kind of like cut off some of that exposure. But nowadays, I mean, between streaming, between the phone being glued to our face, between us bringing that to our bed, right? Every time, it's fascinating even to see like s- I mean, there was a day, and I don't know if you guys remember this. You used to walk into an elevator and you didn't do anything until you got to your floor. But now you get into an elevator and it's like you can't help yourself. You have to pull out your phone, right? And look at it until you reach your destination. And so there are and it's like and it's kind of like I think that combined with the pandemic is like, is there any wonder that like mental health is a very popular topic, because we're self-medicating with anxiety pills, right? And when we feel that, when we kind of like make that a habit, when we make that our daily practice, and we do it in like obscene amounts, is it any wonder that the word would get choked out, right? I was looking up the Greek. It's either you choke it out like literal choking, right, or this word of crowding out, meaning like if we as Christians say like, of course Jesus is Lord, of course I believe in the Bible, right, and but if that single thought stands on its own, and then we crowd that room, right, with, oh, but I have to do this, it's like, and like I need to do this, it's like, this is not good enough. um I'm, I have to lose weight, I have to buy better clothes, like my children, my job, right? These kinds of things, like this, how am I going to afford my retirement, how am I going to like live, what, like how will I feed my children, what are other people going to think of me, right? And if that crowd of voices, and a lot of them are involuntary, right, um far outnumber the single individual that says Jesus is Lord, um, then it does get crowded out, right? How does how does the fruit plant, right, in a garden thrive, right, when it's surrounded by weeds and we don't do anything about them, right? We just say like, well, you just let the. I mean, we're just going to water the weeds. Actually, is probably our daily practice, right, with what we do, and then we're not sure why our plants don't grow, right? Maybe it's like we say like, oh, why aren't I on fire? um well, it's like we just have to look, I think, a little bit more closely right, at our practices.